Hello grade 10. So in this video we'll be solving the second worksheet for the revision for the finals. This worksheet has almost all the ideas for the lesson inverse of function, inverses of functions, and how to find the inverse function and how to know if the functions, if the two given functions are inverses or not using composition. So let's just go through some of these examples to see. This worksheet is already attached to Google Classroom with the answers. So just go through it, try to work on it by yourself, and then check the answer if it's correct or wrong. And if you had any questions, just let me know. Now let's start with the first part in this worksheet. It says state if the given functions are inverses. So here we will be having two functions. So one of them is for example f of x, okay, and the other one is g of x, and we need to know if these functions are inverses, which means the input of this one. So here, if there is x that works as an input, and then we have a certain process which is a function of something that is f of x, gives us an output. Now, is the output of this? If the output of this function works as an input of the second function, gives you the same output as an input of the first one, which is called a feedback. That is the meaning of inverses. So here, to make sure if these two functions are inverses, we're going to use something called composition, which works as the following. Now, here is the first example that we can work on. We have, let's start with, for example, say something a bit different. Number three on the worksheet, it says f of n, here we have f of n is equal to negative 16 plus n over 4. Now this is the first function, and the input here is n, is represented as n. Then we have a second function which is called g of n. Now g of n is equal to 4n plus 16. Okay, now again, we said the meaning of inverses, of inverse function, is that the input of the first function is going to be an output for the second one. So what we're going to do here to make sure of this, we use composition. Composition means that we're going to replace or substitute the input here by the whole function in here, which is an output of the other one. Here's how. Here we have f of n that is equal to f of n is equal. Okay, I'm not going to write f of n here, okay? This is because this is just to make sure of something. Here's what you do. Just take f of n, okay? Write it, which is negative 16 plus n over 4. Now, instead of n here, we're going to put this, which is g of n, which is this whole function, both terms. So instead of n, we're substituting 4n plus 16. Now, here, we're just going to put negative 16 plus, as we said, instead of n, we write the second function, which is, use bracket always, because this might confuse you if there is a negative here. So always use a bracket. This is more just to be in the safe side. So it's 4n plus 16 over 4. So here, instead of n, we just put the second function. Now, what does this leave us with? What do we have left here if we solve this? let's just try um, to simplify it, let's say. Okay, now here if we remove the bracket, what we will have is negative 16 plus 4n plus 16 over n. Sorry, I don't 4 over 4. Sorry. Okay. Here we have negative 16 plus 16, which is 0. So we're left with that is equal to 4n over 4, which is equal to n, which represents, look, represents the input, because originally the input is, it's f of n, so it's the function of n, so the input of this function is n. So what we're having is, what we did right here is f, instead of having f of n, we had f of g of n, so f of g basically. If we have f of g, that means we're having a function of the second function, which should give us the output of this function, or what was the input of the first function. So if the answer at the end, if you follow these procedures, and at the end of these steps you got n, you got the input, or yeah, let's just call it the input. You got the input, the original input, then these functions are inverses, so you're just going to pick the answer yes or the answer true, or depending on what the answer is. Do you see these tips? These are what you guys need to put on your paper on the exam. Okay, anything, any answer on the Google form without these tips will not be included, will not be graded. Okay, so this is how you know if if these two functions are inverses or not. So here's another example. Let's just pick another one. Let's pick 8. Okay, number 8 on the worksheet. It says that g of x is equal to negative 2x minus 1, and the other function is f of x is equal to negative 2 over x plus 1. Here, when you have a negative like this next to the fraction, that means you can use it for the numerator or for the denominator. You can use it for either of them, because this is just a whole number, a whole term. Now, again, we're going to use the composition way to find if these two are inverses, sorry, or not. Okay, let's start. Now here we have x right here. So instead of x here, we're going to put this whole function. So just going to do this cloud going to be here instead of x. Now, if we substitute this, we get negative 2 over this whole thing, which is negative 2 over x plus 1. Let's just put it on a bracket again. And then here we have negative 1. Okay. Now this here, which is negative 2 over x plus 1, is the same as negative 2 multiplied by x plus 1 over negative 2. It's the same thing. This is just a simple property of division. So here, this is actually negative 2 over negative 2 multiplied by x plus 1 minus 1. Here, the negative 2 and the negative 2 are eliminated. Then we will be having x plus 1 minus 1, which is equal to x. Again, we're left with the original input, which means these two functions are inverses. So again, the answer is yes or true, or just finding that they are inverses. Now, let's have another example that gives us a no answer. Let's pick number 2, for example. Now, on the worksheet, it's number 2, which is g of n is equal to negative 12 negative 2n over 3. And the second function is f of n, that is equal to negative 5 plus 6n over 5. Okay, now you can pick any of them. Let's just do like we did before. So instead of n here, we're going to substitute this whole function. Let's do this. We'll be having f of n. Well, let's just don't write this again. Sorry. Let's have negative 5 over 5, which is the denominator is still the same. Oh, sorry, I just did it vice versa. Sorry. Again here, we're substituting. What I did is I substituted the first one and the second one. We're doing it vice versa. So here we have the first one, which is negative 12 here. Negative 12 minus 2n over 3, and the second one is negative 5 plus 6n over 5. So here we'll be having negative 12 minus 2 instead of n. Here the denominator was 3 is still the same. Instead of n, we'll put this whole thing, which is, use a bracket, negative 5 plus 6n over 5. Okay, here let's just simplify this. We get negative 12, negative 2. Now what is inside the bracket is going to become let's just multiply this right away, okay, with the negative sign. Okay, so this becomes positive, and we'll just multiply this into the both numbers inside both terms. So we'll be having positive 10 minus 12n over 5 over 3 in here. Okay, now here again, we're just going to simplify it more. Here we'll be having negative 12 plus the first term here, which is 10 over 5, which is 2. And then we have negative 12n over 5, which is negative just 12 over 5n. Let's do it like this. And then over 3, which is equal to negative 12 plus 2, which is negative 10 over 3. That's the first term that we have, which is just a constant that doesn't have any variable with it right here. And then we have negative the other coefficient here, which is 12 over 5 over 3, which is going to be 12 over what do we have here is 15n. Now, as you can see here, we're not left with n, we're left with a number, another number, and other coefficients, and it doesn't matter with the number that you have here or here. It's just a couple of numbers, and these numbers will get you the answer no. So these two functions are not inverses. Let's move on to the second part of this worksheet, which is finding the inverse equation. It's not just a function, sorry. It's not just knowing if if two functions are inverses or not. You're given one function and you need to find the inverse of it. Let's start with number 9, which is called h of x. That is equal to the third root of x minus 3. Now the steps that we need to do here are, first of all, we change the notation of the function into y. So instead of h of x, we write y equals the third root of x minus 3. The second step is we solve for x, which means we need to put x in one side and the rest of the variables and constants in another side. So here we're just solving for x. Instead of having y equals something, we will have x equals something. So let's do this. First, we just move the 3 into the other side, the negative 3, so it becomes y plus 3, that is equal to the third root of x. Now we need to find x to eliminate or get rid of the root in here. We need to use a power